It's probably happened a lot and we just don't know about it. And maybe Anthropic doesn't know about it or the Gemini team doesn't know about it. I'll tell you the utility, Damon. Are you trying to say that Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, is not a trustworthy fellow? Is that what you're trying to say by building your own at-home LLM? That's the use case. You don't trust the LLM makers.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would never buy this thinking joy. I would always buy this thinking pure utility. Like, I need a job done.
That's because you're an investor, dude. Like, you're no fun, dude.
Yeah, you need to have more joy in your heart, Damon.
Yeah, you don't have enough whimsy, bro. I'm sorry.
Yeah, joy and whimsy is not a staple around here, that's for sure.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Restart Pod. This week, a couple of cool announcements in robotics. The coolest one that got a lot of Twitter hype is the Matic vacuum robot. I know we've been talking a lot about humanoids. We've been talking about the Teslas and the cars. But ultimately, we've had Roombas for the longest time. Out on Twitter came a company named Matic, which went ahead and released this very, very adored vacuum robot. I went ahead and impulse bought one. I just saw this. I kind of loved it. I've been having like a really, really big robotics kick off late. The difference is this one's using like actual cameras as opposed to just sensors to figure out like the mapping of the room. So it can do more intelligent things like knowing what to avoid, like recognizing when something might be a spillable surface. It's more silent, avoids hitting surfaces that would be noisy when you're sleeping, that kind of thing. Shashi, I know you're kind of enthusiastic about this thing too. Did you see this?
Okay, so the video is super cool. Sahil Bloom posted this and I follow his stuff. So really cool demo video. The company started in 2017. So this isn't a brand new outfit. Have any of you guys had the iRobot vacuums?
Yep, back at home.
Satisfaction level, where are you 0 to 10?
I feel like initially, like when they were first cool, like it was very high, 10, like, oh my God, this thing runs automatically at night. But I think the standards for robotics and IoT has just gone up in like maybe the last like 2 or 3 years, where like I look at that thing as like a little bit of a piece of trash, kind of, where it's like the blades are kind of broken, like it can't pick up that much stuff, like it bumps into the same things over and over and over. Like it's just generally more annoying. Yes, it's probably it's adding passive value to my life by being there and doing the things it does, but I don't look at it as doing a good job.
Damon, what's your satisfaction level of the iRobots?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend. I mean, it certainly, I think, is additive just compared to nothing. You know, it kind of does a job, but it certainly isn't a complete job. And I think I probably end up manually vacuuming with my Dyson just as much. And my mom also has one. And I think just it's such an incomplete solution that it kind of almost doesn't justify having it at this point.
Yeah. I totally agree. It's sort of a dumb robot. Like even the standard back then when I bought it, like 5 years ago, it felt like a pretty poorly implemented design and super expensive. This Matic looks much sleeker. Lakshya, you picked one up?
Yeah, I impulse bought it. To be honest, I was sitting there like 2 hours later about like, why did I just spend that much money on a robot when I live in like a
what
pretty
was the
small
sticker?
apartment?
What did you pay?
It's like $1,000. It's like pretty high. I bought it like there's a little bit of like a timing thing where because of tariffs, the prices are going up before December, which I was like, like I'm into robotics. Like in my head, I want to be building this sort of stuff. Like maybe there's some sort of like innovator's justification for being like an adopter of this thing and learning about how this stuff is built. But realistically, I just got excited and hit a pay button really quickly is what happened. Like this wasn't like a very logical decision. This is very like kid has toy, take me to Lego store kind of decision.
Yeah, I love it. That's kind of where I was too. I couldn't find the buy button. I was looking around like, hey, where do I buy one of these things? I want one.
Yeah.
So for context, this company has raised 107 million over 3 rounds. And shout out to apparently Patrick Collison and Jack Dorsey on their investor list. This was definitely an exercise in patience because again, 2017 to 2025 is a long time to wait for a breakthrough product with $107 million.
Damon, are you used to seeing, I mean, like you're more in the VC space than any of us are. Like, are you used to seeing like, this is like a home robotics project. So in my head, I treat it as like a little bit less new terrain than like a humanoid robot where like 8 years is like, yeah, that's a reasonable time from inception to time to market or something. And probably even longer for humanoids. But do you look at like home robot, vacuums are a pretty known category. Is 8 years a lot or a little?
I think it's either. And the thing I would probably say in response just to this company, this is probably a V1 pivot away from where they kind of ultimately were wanting to go. They probably were wanting to build kind of a more sophisticated robot, and they're probably starting to take advantage of technology that's ready here and now. They kind of probably perceive what we saw in like the Roombas and the iRobots of the world are just simply not a good enough solution. And the first things they can accomplish is vacuum and wet dry vac, essentially. So this is probably just revenue en route to what they ultimately want to build. So I think the 8-year delay probably wasn't because they were building a vacuum. It's because they're building whatever else they were building, and vacuum is the accessory to it, if I had to guess. Also, you can make the excuse of tariffs presently, so you can release it at a slightly elevated price. And guess what? It's holiday season. So let's release it. And people that are sleeping on holiday shopping, hand up very firmly in the air on that one. Now we have a new toy that we can buy for the holidays.
But in China, they've had these kinds of robots for a long time, right? Like, don't they
Yeah,
have
the
very
technology, the
similar robots?
technology is not super new or relevant, which is why my like statement on the 8-year time horizon is that it probably isn't a linear path from we are building best in class home vacuum robot. 8 years later, here it is. It is, I'm sure, this like serpentine, we're actually building full autonomy, yada yada, and then we end up at home robot because we can deliver that thing and we need revenue in order to raise our next round.
Yeah.
I see.
And
Do
yay,
you
we have
look
a
at
breakthrough product.
Yeah, it's
It can
interesting
work.
because I mean,
It's not a bad path. Yeah, it's a good pivot.
like it's funny because we talk about all this sort of stuff about like, oh, the future of robotics has like 5 fingers on each hand and can do all these things, but ultimately, like, I had very simple buyer's joy looking at a robot that looked good. Like it was just a very simple 2 wheels, drives around, mops, vacuums. I was happy. And like I think it's really funny to just like think about that and like take a step back from my own perspective, like, oh, you have to be building this like grand, like, very obtuse vision of like the future that does not currently exist. But ultimately, like someone just upgraded an iRobot and I gave them $1,000, which is
Yeah.
fascinating. You know, like it's a little bit different from like even observing my own like interests a little bit, where I'm like, oh, like if I want to build like a robotics project, it needs to be like so unusual and different and unspoken, you know. But like ultimately, like as a consumer, I bought a thing that's 2 wheels, a camera, and a suction tube. You know, like it wasn't that crazy of a product.
Don't discount the
I
mop. The mop is good.
Yeah, the mop is good. The mop is good.
I think the unique insight there is that design wins. I mean, design is kind of always won, right? Like ultimately you're selling to human beings, and like I bought the toothbrush I bought because it looked good at the time. Like it wasn't like I was like, oh, this one's better than the other one. It was just like this one stood out for reasons that I couldn't even clearly articulate, bought it, and have been with it for, whatever, 10 years now. So I
Damon, would
changed
you
the
say that
toothbrush head,
that's
obviously.
do you think that's taste? We keep hearing about AIs having kind of mechanical ability but not taste.
Yeah, in short, I think that like, the classic example would be Steve Jobs looking at the stylus and the BlackBerry and going, we have 5 of those connected to our hand. We don't need this third party accessory, right? Like that's kind of the natural intuition. I think the good product designers do have a way to kind of intuit the median experience such that they can, maybe not the median experience, that's like the poor characterization, but the median experience for their identified customer profile, right? The people they actually want to sell to. They know it kind of what they want before the customer knows they want it, and then they kind of can give them something that ultimately delivers some version of subjective satisfaction that again is like hard for any of us to articulate. Like I don't really know why this one looks better than, the iRobot or whatever. I agree that it does. But I couldn't
Yeah.
articulate why. I think so.
Lakshya, this has to be great news for you. If taste is a key component for builders, and you're someone with great taste, this has to
Okay.
be a super good feeling.
Yeah, I think it's just like I think especially living in San Francisco, you end up kind of like I've mentioned this on like Twitter and stuff before, where like this city loves to obsess about like what is 2050 and 2060 gonna look like and build for that today. I think like that ends up being a red herring a lot of the time because ultimately like the thing you're trying to do is like especially in consumers deliver joy in some shape or another, right? And like ultimately like it's kind of reaffirming to like I think observe my own behavior and recognize like hey, I think this would be a cool thing to have in the house. Oh, wait, maybe I should get this for my mom or my dad. I think they'd love this sort of thing, you know? And that sort of like thinking is very different from like, okay, how do we get like finger articulation to be like the best in class? Like, oh no, we can't like get the automation perfect. Like we need to have a teleoperator and deal with all the quirks of that, you know? If someone were to say like 20,000 for the Neo that can do everything or 1,000 for this like really cool vacuum robot, the vacuum robot's such an easier decision, weirdly, you know?
I do question whether or not that's present though.
Sure.
Like if you told me all of a sudden that Neo robot could vacuum my house with the Dyson that I already have, that to me does kind of smell like a little bit of a completely different value proposition than
It's just
a
this, I
collection
think
of.
I think it's the sort of thing where like I think a lot of companies that are AI first, like AI first insofar as like the product they're delivering, not in regards to how they work. So AI first in regards to the product they're delivering, like there are so many companies still stuck in like we need the models to get better for our product to be complete. So they release like a half-baked function, if that makes sense. Whereas like something like a vacuum robot like this is like the function's complete now. The function works now. It delivers a value and a shape and a bundle that is like pleasing to own, you know? And so I'm not buying like a promise. I'm buying like a gizmo for the house that I like. You know, I treat it in the same way that like I was very attentive to like the color matching of my furniture, and I'll probably buy some skin for the robot so it matches my furniture or something, you know? Like something to that effect where like I can look at complete functionality, assume that the value it adds to my life and the joy it brings to me is defined, not hypothetical in the future. Will humanoids get there? Probably at some point. But right now, what I want to pay for is something that's cool and does the job, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because I would never buy this thinking joy. I would always buy this thinking pure utility. Like I need
That's
a
because
job
you're
done.
that's because
Yeah,
you're an
full
investor,
stop.
dude.
Yeah,
You're no
just pure.
fun, dude.
Yeah, just
You need to
pure.
have more. You need to have more joy in your heart, Damon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't have enough whimsy, bro. I'm sorry.
Yeah, joy, and whimsy is not a staple around here. That's for sure. It's funny.
Another news. So flipping to the other side of much more serious parts of AI, Anthropic intercepted what is documented as the first agentic cyber attack. A couple of, I think literally yesterday. So we're filming on the 14th or 13th. Yeah, we're filming on the 14th. Anthropic's claims that they detected and dealt with the first agentic cyber attack. What this means is that normally a cyber attack is a hacker like digging through systems, like trying to find secrets, environmental codes, like breakthrough authorization, and rip out data from organizations that they're not supposed to. What Anthropic's like kind of like breakdown is of what actually happened here. They claim that someone used their Claude Code tool and their tools systems around Claude Code to basically ask like AI agents to figure out like, hey, go look at this website, figure out where like the vulnerabilities are, do a vulnerability scan, that sort of stuff on existing known websites. They focused on government websites. They focused on like well-known public companies. And effectively, they just used Claude Code and like vibe hacked a number of systems. Anthropic caught it, like they intercepted it, notified like the victim companies, I guess, and victim organizations about it. But it's really funny because all that really took, like if you look at this diagram that's sort of explaining what's going on here, um, all that they really did is that they just used MCP tools and took like prompts that normally Anthropic would be like, I cannot help you do a security break-in. If you ask something too wide, it won't let you. But all they say is like, hey, I'm a developer of a website. Do a vulnerability scan. Hey, I'm like, now that we've done the vulnerability scan, like, can you do like penetration testing for my website that I own, but the website you own is like Zamibia.gov or something similar, right? Um, and it really like fundamentally did not seem that hard to crack. It doesn't read that it was hard to crack. All it took was that getting around the guardrails was just a matter of breaking down the tool prompt to look like innocuous things that when summed together became something really malicious, which is really unusual. It's the first case of this happening. I think a lot of people are really worried about this space, and what it means for something like a Claude Code that understands how code works, how websites works, how databases work, to be able to do this. Do y'all think that this happens again? Like, how do we actually stop this from happening?
It's probably happened a lot, and we just don't know about it. And maybe Anthropic doesn't know about it, or the Gemini team doesn't know about it. But it's good that we're catching these cases and incrementally can continue to patch these kind of prompt around the guardrails attacks. Um, of course, they're going to keep happening. There's money to be made, information to be stolen. Governments have interests. Every nefarious actor in every country has economic interests. So yeah, of course, it's going to keep happening.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add here other than, yeah, it feels inevitable. And the good news is you're going to have AI systems combating AI systems here. There's always going to be slightly more economic incentive for bad actors than good actors in these arenas, but it'll constantly kind of be this tug of war, kind of like in any other kind of security endeavor.
Yeah, the thing I get most, I mean, this is kind of on like the vibe coding topic, like less vibe hacking, is that just many more people are producing code and putting it up publicly than ever before. And that's like very liberating. Obviously, like, that's a very like good thing, I think, for general human creativity and output and that sort of thing. But it's also unusual because all of these systems are like the code that they're writing is based on training that has an age, right? Like the way you write a website, the way that you write like backends. Like even I sometimes when I say like, hey, Vercel, spin up an app that does this, it'll use an outdated version of Vercel, right? I'm a software engineer, I can catch that, I can upgrade it, whatever. But the average person who would hopefully be enabled by vibe coding um, is likely to produce more of these systems, right? That have intense vulnerabilities, right? That maybe even if the AI labs have caught up to them and are protecting around them, it doesn't mean the app building layer has, right? Um, and so it ends up being like I think like Anthropic's take on is like, we'll continue to serve the systems of the way that we are, like we'll guard against it more intensely, and we're going to spend more cybersecurity agents, like threat detection agents, which is good. Um, but it is a little unusual. Like it's a little bit of like I think cat and mouse where like these systems are getting better and better. I don't think like there's a way to beat agentic cyber hacking truly. Like what you ultimately have to do is like the code we're producing from these AI systems, especially the world eventually goes towards all code being AI written. Um, is like a prompt guardrail is not going to be the thing that saves your website or your database or your HIPAA compliant organization. It's going to have to be like
Mhm.
from the root level of the people writing these codes and the systems writing these codes being really, really good.
And not all the models are going to have guardrails at all, right? You're gonna
Right.
have the
Use case.
the Chinese models, for example, are going to have their own sets of guardrails, and they won't comply with what we think are fair and reasonable guardrails for LLMs. And as they keep getting better, and not just Chinese, but potentially Russian models and other models are going to be much more liberal in what they allow you to do. So we can't also count on any guardrails of any LLM being the layer of protection to just add to your point, Lakshya.
Yeah, I think like especially I know there's like most of the concern. So this attack by Anthropic, they claim that it was from Chinese actors, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's state, whether that's individual, hard to say, but it was of Chinese origin. Like a lot of the conversation around open source LMs comes from like China's basically on bleeding edge, if not already about to beat us basically on like the qualities models. I think one thing that's really, really interesting that I heard in like a secondary bit of conversation is the open source universe of China is just a lot better than America is. But what that means is that a lot of researchers are using Quen, Kimi models, that sort of thing in their research. For example, Composer is a derivative of Quen, like Cursor's Composer model that they just released is a post-trained version of Kimi or something, or Quen, I think. And so we're seeing like more and more open source models from a differently governed body coming into the States, which obviously has implications for like the quality of our quote unquote defenses or the quality of the models that we're using for these like threat detections, for these for like threat action and agency and security detection, that sort of thing. That just feels like right now, the universe of how that like politically lands is not in Western favor, if that makes sense.
Hey, you want to go to Bitcoin? I'm just curious your take. Like, price has been dropping pretty fast. Yeah, do you have any like gut reaction, Damon? I know you're into markets, you're into prices of things. What do you think?
Yeah, it typically precedes or coincides with consumer sentiment, right? So you just have Bitcoin, Ethereum, kind of all these cryptocurrencies tend to ride those same waves as consumer sentiment. So meaning when consumers perceive the economy to be great and people have extra discretionary spend, they tend to invest in these assets. And then when they kind of contract, when they start to tighten belts, so to speak, these asset classes are the ones that get retreated from first. So it could be end of the year, kind of typical cycles, people prepping for holidays, people trying to tax lost harvest perhaps, or just maybe consumer sentiment saying stocks are inherently risky. We're going to a more risk off model right now. There's uncertainty in the eastern part of the world and the western part of the world. People are pulling back from more quote unquote risky assets. I'm not sure it's any more than that. I mean, we've seen kind of general stock market pullbacks as well. So I think probably that's the most, kind of a straightforward explanation.
For the last couple of years, we've seen Bitcoin move basically in line with equities. So risk on temperament means risk on with equities, risk on with Bitcoin. And this week, something has happened that's different, which is that Bitcoin is off and stocks are generally on. And that delta in movement feels like a new thing. It feels like a real change in sentiment. I'll just give you my opinion. I think Bitcoin is perhaps the dumbest way to do money you could think of. It would take you 20 minutes to complete a block on the blockchain, and exponentially more and more energy year over year to continue maintaining this proof of work chain by decoding these sequence of bits. Like, why? Like, the only beneficiaries in first principles thinking that you could get to is some kind of theft that you'd want to hide from a government body or something. If you didn't actually care about like that level of secrecy, then there's absolutely no reason to spend this much money on energy and maintaining a decentralized blockchain.
The only other metric I would cite is credit defaults are rising. And so when you see that coincide, you see the pullback in these riskier asset classes as well historically, like if you look at across trends. And so unlike when we've seen the coupling of crypto with the greater stock market, that has been when credit defaults, especially like credit cards and like subprime rates are level, or at least reasonably level, we're seeing those go up, which means people are tapping into kind of unfavorable sources of short-term income. Typically, they're defaulting like credit defaults either on credit cards or car loans, et cetera, those kind of things. And so I think that probably is, again, I think what you're seeing is people have less spending power in the current economy, and one of the ways to track that is how many things are flowing into these what you would consider extra investments. I
So
actually
you're saying
agree with you. I
people
don't
need
think
money and they're selling Bitcoin to have spending money.
Yeah, that, or they're just worried that their other investments are going to go down, and so they're shifting into more conservative investments, right? They think interest rates are going to drop, therefore maybe T-bills or something other more conservative investment become more attractive. They're just pivoting out of one asset into the other. For the people that are engaging with high fractions of their investments in crypto, those tend to be younger people. Those tend to be people with less discretionary income, right? It's not people that are ultra high net worth that have a large fraction of their Bitcoin. A lot of times when you see these Bitcoin sell-offs, part of it is public sentiment. Part of it is because people are forced sellers because they have to have the money, right? People are having to sell their Bitcoin or their Ethereum or their Solana or whatever to cover their credit card bills for the month. That's what I think is going on.
There's this company
From
called
like
MicroStrategy. Sorry, just to add just a data detail here. There's a company called MicroStrategy, and they've owned the biggest known tranche of Bitcoin, like over 400,000 Bitcoin, and they have been trading at a multiple of Bitcoin, so 1.5 times their book value in Bitcoin. They, for the first time, are trading below their book value in Bitcoin, meaning their total company is worth less than their Bitcoin holdings. So I just find this a really interesting dynamic.
That probably go ahead.
I was gonna start a new thing. You go ahead. You go ahead.
I was gonna say, I actually think that kind of makes sense because their whole shtick, right, is that they are extra volatile as a layer on top of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So that means higher ups, lower lows. So I think if like, regardless of your opinion of MicroStrategy, this is exactly as they describe it. We are going higher than Bitcoin and we are going lower. I think we all kind of are of the opinion that lower is the ultimate destination here, but time will tell.
With so like I ask you this because you field so many deals, Damon, but like with crypto has its waves and like who's building in crypto, like how much energy goes into like founders building crypto things. A lot of crypto founders became AI founders. Like how much does like crypto enthusiasm as like amount of deal flow that you see depend on like the success of these coins and their market going, like their graphs going up? Is it independent?
It's not independent, but it's less so than the regulatory environment. I can tell you that.
Okay.
Like we have seen far more builders building in this regulatory environment than we saw building in previous regulatory environments. That's been the strongest kind of correlative indicator, independent of the price ups and downs. That has been kind of the strongest, if I were to point to one variable that says this is the most, 0.99 correlation, it's that. That said, prices absolutely drive investor and public sentiment. So you're going to naturally have attention, right, attracting to the things that are returning, the highest multiples. And so right now, I would say that people are eager both from a regulatory standpoint and also because crypto has, this year kind of aside, have been good following kind of the fall of last year.
This is just a quick summary of MicroStrategy's their statistics. Their current share price is 198. 3 months they've gotten kicked in the teeth. Negative 47%. They've got over 600,000 Bitcoin. I mean, that's a ton of Bitcoin. Their net asset value is $61 billion, so it's quite a bit of Bitcoin, and they're trading at presently a 1.19 multiple of Bitcoin. So that's their
Interesting. Were you ever? I mean, I feel like Shashi, you had talked about MicroStrategy a couple of times before. Were you ever eyeing them as like a thing to mimic, or no? Like, do you ever think that what they're like was their strategy sound at some point? Now it's just proven bad.
In the bull case, MicroStrategy is a levered Bitcoin bet. So let's say You're a Bitcoin bull. You think it's just going straight up. And MicroStrategy they have leverage because they can give out loans. They can buy more Bitcoin than most people and store it in a way that feels secure. And they own the custody problem, not you. And it's a public stock. So you can just go buy this stock. So I did buy a substantial amount of Bitcoin, a substantial amount of MicroStrategy. I sold earlier this month. So I got off this position because it had already been losing a lot of traction at that point, and I wanted to get off that. But it's an interesting strategy. I have friends who are trying to mimic this strategy by acquiring businesses and keeping treasury in Bitcoin. If you're a Bitcoin maximalist, if you're a maxi, you think Bitcoin's going to the moon, and you're HODL, HODL, then why not maximize your Bitcoin holding?
I see. Interesting. Switching gears a little bit, there was are you all aware of who PewDiePie is? So
I'm too old for
basically,
that,
like,
Lakshya.
this is my
young
time.
bucks.
I was this is my generation of teenage and younger, where PewDiePie was this YouTuber from, like, he retired many years ago, but he like dominated YouTube. Like, he's kind of like before Mr. Beast was the scale that he was. Like, he was kind of like the predominant face of YouTube sort of thing. He's a YouTuber, made like, like gaming videos, like that sort of thing, but was very, very popular back in like early 2010s, like late 2000s. He still posts every now and again, but he's like, for all intents and purposes, retired. The thumbnail of his video is stop using ChatGPT, which was very, very interesting given that he's not like a tech person in any capacity. Instead, what he is he's a tech hobbyist. He lives with his wife in Japan, built his own PC, like has learned a little bit of code writing, and has started self-hosting GPT OSS. So ChatGPT's like biggest open source model. He built a rig with, I think, a bunch of, it says it right here, 8 4090s, which is a lot of 4090s. Like, for the record, this is like pretty expensive for the average person. So obviously a little bit of like, he has a benefit of having made his wealth, like is able to buy all these GPUs and run them for hobby affairs. But he's running basically like a localized server that he self-constructed for running an LLM that does jobs for him. Like, he has it running in the background. He has set up workflows that it writes code for him. It's able to like support things around his life where it improves the like application that his like ChatGPT proxy, it writes its own code for the ChatGPT proxy. He has memory for deep research against like Google. He's kind of just like doing what a lot of techno enthusiasts talk about is the future, where LLMs live personal to you and are kind of on like this like box that lives in your home. It's all decentralized. You're not paying for Gemini or OpenAI to serve use cases that you are trying to get done. It's just something that like you own a box, that box does work in the same way that you might have a dishwasher or fridge as an appliance in your house, which is just really cool. The reason I bring this up is I think that like, he's not a technology person. Like, he's not fundamentally like an engineer, but he's arriving on a lot of these ideas about like, hey, I might want like a agentic swarm. Like, that's what this line is, where he has like a number of chat bots that all answer the same prompt and they look at consensus and he scores all of them, right? And I think it is fascinating that he is not an engineer, but he's able to interact with all of this stuff. And the reason I raise it up is, on the other side of talking about like the vibe coding and the vibe hacking and the vulnerability conversation, we've never been at a time where this has been more accessible to someone who is not technical. Like, yes, he paid for some pretty expensive GPUs. Yes, he had to figure out how to assemble them. But ultimately, like, he's built a brain that runs in his house for him basically on his own, which I think is fascinating. And I think it's like a very, very good prompt for a lot of people, especially those who are technology adjacent. Is there a business around this? I don't know. But at least this is like very, very exciting for what it means for like the individual person who might be curious about AI and wants to dabble with it. Like, this is one of the coolest hobbyist projects I've seen from someone who's not an engineer.
I think it probably just like the most optimistic result of kind of increased access to knowledge, right? Like, if everything works with AI, you have at least non-physical AI, right? Large language models, whatever software. Basically, what you have is a increased distribution of knowledge, increased access to, like you said, how to do things that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to do, whether that's writing new software via vibe coding or whether that is actually making things in the physical world, because you can now ask a kind of, semi-intelligent thing how to do it. In like the most simple example, I didn't know, my wife had a flat tire several months ago, didn't know how to access the specific tire wrench in her vehicle. And so I asked ChatGPT and it told me, and then I could feed it pictures and confirm that I was using the tools correctly, basically. And again, I just kind of see that as a very optimistic lean, where it's like if you have interest, you can now gain knowledge to act on that interest in ways that you didn't see before. Someone would have to explain to me the utility of exactly what he's built in a way that makes it, this particular project interesting. But I think the meta concept of this project is incredibly interesting.
I'll tell you the utility, Damon. Are you trying to say that Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, is not a trustworthy fellow? Is that what you're trying to say by building your own at-home LLM? That's the use case. You don't trust the LLM makers.
Yeah, I think he does very much open with like, I watched this video, like this video came out like beginning of November. So it's a little bit like escape from me about like his motivation, but I do believe a lot of it stemmed from like, keep it private to me. Like, why am I just handing out data to every person left, right, and center? Like in that sort of circumstance, like I think there's a conversation around like how comfortable are we generally with like my data goes to XYZ person. But I think on the more like less like, I think technopolitic side of things, like there is an angle of like having at-home compute that's on all the time. Like I think in this world where like we assume cameras are always on and doing things and microphones are always on and doing things, like there's much more peace of mind to be had if you know that like there's not a network connection from the thing that's doing that inference work, right? And so like how far will that go? Like will society just change to be more comfortable with recording and like permanent visibility from the greater big brother, whoever that is, like who owns the LMs that we choose? I don't know. But in a other universe where it's like, hey, I can run these models on my own very, very comfortably and they do the jobs that they need them to. And I know that there's no network. Like that's a very idyllic sort of setting where like I don't need Sam Altman in my dishwasher,
Yeah, I can buy that this is en route to local LLMs in a way that you need to like house your own data. You don't need that many GPUs to do that. That's not what this project
Right.
is. Right. This
Right.
project is a hyperscaled, frankly, advertisement for, hey, look at this cool thing I'm doing. And
Right.
here, let me show this thing that is inherently meant to be for security purposes on the internet. There's a bit of a
Right.
conflict there if that really
I
is a
see.
centralized goal, right? Like, I mean,
I
yeah,
see.
sure. The goal here is eyeballs. Like, I mean, to be frank, but in the reality, in the like, purely optimist view of this, sure, I can buy local AI models, and like we don't want our data leaking to the model providers, whether that's OpenAI or Google or whatever. I think that's reasonable. I think to go to this extreme is not.
I do think
in line with that
there are
goal.
cases. I don't know how many people I've met who are doing this sort of thing because it is like hardware is hard, and I think like enterprise is also boring. And I think there's a small overlap of people who want to deliver enterprise things that are hardware. Like that's just like there's a rare category of people who are excited to do that. But there are people I know who like they are trying to toy with legal AI or something. And instead of trying to solve like the security problem by saying like, okay, we're going to go get SOC 2 and build software, whatever, like what they're shipping is like a brain box that runs inside of that office, basically.
Yep.
Again, hardware is hard, enterprise is boring. There's not too many people who like that overlap, but like there are people doing that where like if what PewDiePie made is something that like, again, I don't think he's in any universe where he wants to start selling these or scaling his startup or something. But in some universe, like I could imagine that if you were to produce these boxes at scale or something and they're able to do very quality ChatGPT like things and they were tuned for some legal workflow or some healthcare workflow, like you could probably sell that as a company. Like you just need supply chain to be
100%.
worked out and manufacturing to be like worked out. And that product has a lot of space to run.
100%. Yeah, like an
This is the
on-prem compute cluster works.
This is the perfect AI product for a big hardware company that has not yet figured out AI. A company that's got great design, feel, and touch, has great distribution, and knows how to put compute in people's homes and in their pockets. This is Apple's AI play. You just came up with it. You put a big box of compute in somebody's house. You sell it to them like you sell them a Mac on their desktop, but it's just got a ton of compute, right? Like what do we have now? We all buy local compute in our pockets, on our desks. We use local power. We use local internet. All of these things could just be naturally extended with local LLM with a little bit more hardware. And all you need to do is take an open source model, add some local GPU power focused on just this problem. Apple's next $1 trillion market cap increase.
Yeah, for whatever it's worth, after our last conversation, I spent more time thinking about Apple. I'm very bullish Apple after thinking about it a little bit more. Like I think the choice to move away from being an LLM lab is a very, very wise one. in their present state. But I don't know if I think I was mentioning this before we started recording, but for some of the work I was doing, I just didn't want to spend on embedding models. So I ended up, I bought this new MacBook, like it's got the M5 chip and everything, like the one I'm recording on right now, solely for the purpose that like my old one could not run a local model if it tried. Whereas like I'm able to like click a button, go to bed overnight, and like my embeddings job and everything is running off of like a laptop machine that Apple has optimized to be able to run like a little bit of public LLM stuff just off of a llama or something similar. That's a very different future than what's being pitched by like OpenAI. We're going to produce new hardware that has to be always on, always recording. Please sign off on that and then let us do our thing. Cool. I think we'll wrap it there for the day. Thank you all for hanging out with us on the pod. We'll catch y'all next week. Peace.
Back to vibe coding. Let's do this.
See y'all.